Face to face, hand to hand, film to film.
Welcome to the Film to Film podcast. My name is James Shurkin. I am joined here by my good friend and fellow film enthusiast, Iñaki Linero. How are you doing, Iñaki?
Doing pretty well, James. How are you doing?
Not bad. Apparently, the way I pronounced your name was specifically very weird today because Google Translate gave quite a strange translation. So today we are going to be going back to the mid-2000s to 2005, and so talking about a film that's 16 years old now, talking about Election, made in Hong Kong by Johnnie. I believe this is the first time view for you. Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't know Reese Witherspoon was in Hong Kong during that era.
Yeah, you know, her and Matthew Broderick did just teaming up for some great electoral politics of the triads.
I know. No, it's a good movie. Good movie, though.
Yeah, I was waiting for you. I was waiting for one of us to make that joke because it had to happen. I think anyone that podcasts about this movie is required to make a joke about the Reese Witherspoon Matthew Broderick one. Yeah, it's also a good movie, I think. But today, that's not what we're talking about. This is the first time view for you, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. And what did you think of this on your first try?
It was good. It was good. It was nice to see Hong Kong with some democracy. No, but it was a very engaging and fun movie to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm bringing it in sort of in this more autumnal season, just because it's time to vote. At least it's going to be time to vote in about 6 weeks here in America. Not a presidential election here, nor are we electing a chairman for our local triad association. But, you know, as seasonally appropriate as we're going to get in our individual lives. Yeah, but it is kind of funny because they do make that joke at one point that they're like, oh, the triads have had democracy longer than Hong Kong has, and now I don't know if Hong Kong will be having many more elections, sadly.
I mean, they might have some sort of election.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm glad you liked it. This is my second view of the film. I saw this film probably, I think it was 10 or 11 years ago when I was kind of going through more of a Hong Kong deep dive and watching a bunch of different films from Hong Kong. And it's interesting. It comes at sort of an interesting period in Hong Kong cinema, too. Hong Kong, of course, is known for a lot of their genre films, 1970s, 1980s. Of course, their Wong Kar-wai films in like the 90s and 2000s as well. And this comes post-handover, which was in 1997. So it's 2005. So it's about 8 years after that handover took place. But it is also very distinctly a Hong Kong film. And I've been reading a bit about it, and merely by sort of depicting the triad rituals and stuff like that, it was guaranteed to have a category 3 rating, which is kind of their version of a NC-17, which means that you only had to be means you had to be an adult to see the film. So kind of doing a bit of research about it, the director Johnnie specifically wanted this. It was important for him to have that sort of those cultural scenes in there. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I wonder if, because I mean here NC-17 is like a very strong rating, but I know in other places like it's actually way more common to see like over 18 rating, like over 18 ratings and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. In the case of category 3, though, it's very it's very similar to NC-17. People do not want to get that rating in general because without that, everyone can see it. But they knew they were going to get it by showing sort of that 15-minute sequence with the triads and stuff like that, because it's not especially violent. I mean, there's certainly violence, but it's not like blood is flying at the camera or anything like that in that sense. So I think if they really wanted to, they probably could have gone for less than a Category 3 rating, but they probably would have had to sort of cut a lot of that triad-specific content.
Wait, are we talking about like the ceremony scene?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, back in this time too, Hong Kong had to rely a lot less on the mainland market. So I think that's why this film is in Cantonese. A lot of the films Hong Kong's cranking out these days are in Mandarin, even though it's not the native tongue of most Hong Kong people. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of this interesting transition time where it's a distinctly sort of Hong Kong film rather than being more of a mainland Chinese flavor. Yeah. Okay. So at the time, this film was really well received. It was the fourth highest grossing film from Hong Kong that year. It did get significant play in the international circuits as well. I think it played, I'm not sure if it played in Cannes, but it played somewhere in Europe. It won 4 different Hong Kong Film Awards, was nominated for 9. Tony Leung Ka-fai, who is also known as Big Tony, not to be confused with Little Tony, who's in like Shang-Chi and Infernal Affairs and a bunch of the Wong Kar-wai films, won for Best Actor, sort of as like the big loudmouth gangster here, or triad. Simon Yam was nominated but did not win, who plays sort of the quieter Locke, and Johnnie To and the movie both won. So it was a very, very successful sort of Category 3 outing where that rating was not a sort of death blow to the film. Quentin Tarantino was a big fan of the film at the time. He called it one of the best films from 2005. So he was sort of like an early supporter of the film. Yeah, we'll get into a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit about Johnnie To and stuff like that. I also saw recently that Guardian released a list of the 30 best gangster films, and this was number 13 on the list. So I thought that was also kind of fun to see that the film is also kind of more recently been shouted out as well. Okay, so let's get into a little bit about the movie. So before we jump in, anything you want to touch on? Anything stand out to you?
I mean, I thought that there were some really cool shots and cinematography in this film that really caught my attention. In a certain way, you could tell that there was a lot of attention to detail. The music, the music was actually also very fun. It kept you pumped in the scenes that you were, supposed to be pumped. And then there was one song that was used both in the happy scene and then ironically on a not so happy scene. I think I just really liked. I thought this was a very complete movie. It's just very well made overall.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's one thing I like about Johnnie To is like he's just a very superb craftsman. He's the director of the film as well as the producer. I'm glad you touched on the music too. I also think it works well with the film. It sort of has like some like more traditional bent where you can it's classy, so you can play it sort of on like these triad ritualistic scenes, and it doesn't feel out of place. But it also kind of has, I don't know, it keeps on moving. I liked it. I thought it was well suited to sort of like the mood of the film. It gives it a certain like gravitas in a way that just sort of makes it feel a little more, I don't know, a little more gravity to the movie. So I like that. And yeah, I mean, I think this film and just sort of like traditional movie making stuff is just really well done. Visually, it's really good. A lot of just stuff is done just through simple blocking and camera movement and stuff like that I think is pretty great throughout the film. And it's just a very handsome looking film.
Yeah. I guess one last thing I kind of forgot to say was that the killing scenes, or the few times that you had death in this film, where you don't have that many. We're very far removed. It reminds me of, I always forget the name of that Japanese horror film with the hypnosis.
Cure.
Cure. It reminded me of Cure, where you are kind of removed from the violence. You're seeing it framed far away from those different moments.
Yeah, it's almost a little more distant in some sense. It doesn't like have like the big swell of like a Hollywood film or maybe even a Korean film from the same era.
Mm-hmm.
One thing. So here's a question for you. So this film is only 100 minutes long, so it's a very reasonably length film. But I think it packs a ton of characters in. It's hard for me to think of any comparisons of like similarly length films that have as many different characters in here. And I think it does it really well, giving everyone's like super distinct nicknames and like everyone has like a very there's a lot of great faces that are different from one another that I think really benefit the film in a way that you can tell different characters apart. That being said, there's a lot of characters packed in. Can you think of, like, if you were to compare this film versus any other like gangster film or anything like that, what do you think the closest would be for you?
For some reason, I thought of Goodfellas when watching this film a lot.
Interesting.
Between that and The Godfather, those were like the two films that like most came to mind when watching it, because you had a little bit of like you had the hothead, which in Goodfellas Joe Pesci. Here is this other guy, and he in both situations it's a character who should be important, very powerful, but also considered dangerous to the organization. You have and when The Godfather more in the like, I guess it's like the main not the main character, but Luck is more like I almost feel like Sonny Corleone, and like he's very thoughtful, like methodical.
You mean Michael? Michael.
Michael. Not Sonny.
Sonny,
Sonny is the my bad. Michael.
Yeah.
Michael Corleone, where like methodical, thoughtful, but I mean, still not all there.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's for me. This film is more Godfather than Goodfellas. Even though that moment at the beginning where Nick Chung's character, I forget what his character's name is, eats the spoon. It does remind me a lot of Goodfellas, where it's like, oh, you think that's funny? I'll show you what's funny. And then he's like, eat the spoon, and he just goes ahead and eats the spoon. That scene definitely did remind me a bit of Goodfellas, where like the Big D is like sort of the hot-headed guy. But The Godfather also does have a hot-headed guy in Sonny.
Sonny, you're right.
Earlier. Yeah. One thing I do really like, for me, I think it's Godfather, but it's kind of amazing to me that this film packs so much into a film that's basically half the length. Originally I was going to show this film with the sequel, Triad Election, which comes out a year later, which covers the next election of the Triads. And it kind of looks at a lot of sort of the people that are in those rituals and that help to transport the baton, and kind of looks at the drama surrounding the next election with those people. And it's a good companion. I think that film is just as good as this one. So in that sense, it also kind of reminds me of The Godfather in the sense that it has a really, really kick-ass sequel that works quite well.
Is it better than the first one? Like some people say The Godfather 2 is better than the first one. Is that the same case with here, or not really?
I'm of the opinion that The Godfather 2 is better than Godfather 1. I'd say, I got to rewatch it. I saw that film the same time I watched the election the first time, but on my initial watch I gave them the same rating, and I think I slightly preferred the second one over the first one, which is to say that it's good because I really liked this film on my second watch as well. And one thing I like about this film too is also, since we're talking about sort of the two leads, Locke and Big D, is just sort of how they contrast the two, especially like in sort of the entrances. We see them both sort of eating. We get like a sense of their personality. Locke is just like a lot more reserved, a lot quieter. We think he seems a lot more thoughtful, a lot smarter, and a lot more of a nice guy. And we almost just assume that just due to that sheer contrast of Big D, who's just like, from the moment you see him, is just like very brash, in your face. He's like shouting. He's making people eat spoons. He seems like a guy you wouldn't want to hang out with. And he's just like making open bribes and stuff like that. Later we find out, it sort of twisted in a way that we find out that Locke may not be such a nice guy after all. But I like the way that it just sort of like contrasts the demeanors pretty A to B in like the first half an hour of the film.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you were to point how this film did it quicker or shorter, is that the characters are more obvious. Like, I mean, with the Godfather, the character, like the all the traits of the characters take a while to build in, because they're not exaggerated. In this one, they were exaggerated, off the bat, like Big D, asshole right away. Like that's why Big D reminded me of Joe Pesci's, because Joe Pesci's kind of like that. It was just right away, as opposed to the Godfather, like Sonny Corleone. He's more subtle. You learn that he's like rash and brash and all that, but he's more subtle at first as a film. It builds in as you get to know him. Here, first scene, eat a fucking spoon, done, and then the guy eats it and he's like, "Wow, you're a fucking dog that follows any order." Shit like that. While the other guy, it's like right away, like all his first scene, he's like eating with his son, being a family man. So it's like, it through the medium right away, it puts each character in their place. And I think also the movie kind of knows that whoever's watching it already saw The Godfather, so they already know these characters. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the directors watched The Godfather and he's like, all right, what's his name?
Johnny Toe.
Johnny Toe. No, that's the director, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking of Uncle Tang.
Oh, Uncle Tang.
Yeah, Uncle Tang, who kind of who's almost like the Godfather in this film, like the first, the Marlon like Brando character.
Yeah.
Had he not died, or been shot, and like and you get it right away. He's like, fat guy, talks slow. He's just very calm and collected. He drinks tea.
Yeah.
He makes tea.
He seems very wise.
Exactly. But I mean, like you get all of them. The guy who's like drunk right away. You see him drunk. I don't know. Like I think it's part has to do with the characterization. The film right away puts each character, right away. Like that's the first thing you see is, oh, this guy is an alcoholic. Oh, this guy is blah blah blah. And I think The Godfather took a while to build onto that, and that's where this movie made that shortcut.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, The Godfather is so much more of a slow build, and I mean, I think you and I both. We've never talked about The Godfather actually, but I'm a big fan of The Godfather. I think it's one of the best films.
I think I still have your DVD set of The Godfather.
Okay, there you go. Okay. Well, The Godfather is much more of a slow build, and this film, I feel like if you step away from this film, even to just grab a snack for like 30 seconds or something like that, you're going to miss something. This film just moves. It has a ton of economy, and it feels like there's hardly any space or shots wasted and stuff like that. So in that sense, it's almost just like this super stuffed 100-minute gangster epic. Because I do feel like this film gives that sort of like more epic feel, despite having, a much shorter runtime than those. And that's just kind of what you said, where it's just like it's not wasting any time or having any. It doesn't have the time for sort of a slow build. It's like Big D. His name is Big D, so we kind of have an idea of his personality from the get-go, and he's just shouting stuff at people. And it's like, okay, yeah, we know exactly who this character is and why. And then we contrast it with Locke, and we just see him like calmly eating chicken or something like that, or with his son. And it's like, okay, we have some idea of this guy too. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So one thing that I do think is probably easier for Hong Kong audiences, and I listened to a great podcast on this before, a podcast on Fire, that just sort of talked a little bit more from like an insider's perspective on the Hong Kong film industry is that this film does have a lot of sort of inside touches to it. Supposedly Johnny To has like relatives that were involved in the triads and stuff like that. So it took a lot of like just sort of attention to detail in sort of like creating sort of that rich tapestry and stuff like that, and how some of that stuff might sort of float over non-Cantonese, non-Hong Kong natives' heads in a way that, you know, like someone watching, the comparison they made is like someone from Hong Kong watching The Irishman or Goodfellas or something like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. I personally, I mean, I do have Cantonese roots, but I'm very disconnected from that sort of society. So I'd say I probably view it from far more of a lens of an outsider in that sense. But I don't know. It's good to hear, but it also makes me feel like I probably did miss out on certain details and stuff. How'd you feel about sort of like those ritualistic stuff shown sort of halfway through the film, where we show like Locke taking control and sort of making a family with I don't know if family is the right term, with
brothers.
Like brothers, there you go. Sort of like forming that brothers with like 6 or 7 of the people that helped him get the baton.
I mean, it looked cool. I don't know. Like I'm not sure if I missed out on anything. I mean, you know, I have zero. Going back with the comparison with The Godfather, I guess. Like The Godfather has like those dinners and have like some sort of scenes like that similar, and I'm like, I could say openly, I have zero Sicilian background and zero, you know, like Cantonese background, and I don't know anyone who's ever been a member of any kind of gang. For me, these were all very interesting ways of learning about things. Like I actually didn't. I knew that triads were a type of organized crime in China. I had no idea of them that they followed the Ming Dynasty, or they were like, you know, Mingist, if that's a word. And that was really cool to learn. And you know, and I took the ceremony at face value until someone else tells me, no, that's bullshit. And I'm like, okay, so I'm guessing that, you know, they kill a live chicken and they all drink out of a fucking bowl, and you know and you know, you get 1,000 lightnings for certain forms of transgressions.
Okay, so it is you are a visitor in this world.
Yeah. And I don't mind it. And if you were like, oh, I know what this means, and you explain it to me, I would enjoy it even more. I find it more richer. And I mean, I agree with you with the missing out, but the whole point is, yeah, obviously I'll be missing out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to hear that the film sort of works on like these different levels where it's like you and I can enjoy it as more of like outsiders to it, but. And I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, that's, of course, what they would probably expect from an international audience. But it is nice to hear that they have sort of that extra attention to it as well.
Well, but so I'm kind of curious now that you mentioned this, whether if you were, let's say, Cantonese, you wouldn't necessarily understand all of this. Because you mentioned how the director... and people who knows or has worked with people who were in the triads and things like that. So maybe there were some stuff that only people who have been in a triad would know, and not even like your average Joe in Hong Kong.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be the ones to fact check that. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I brought up the whole Sicilian thing. Is like, I cannot fact check anything from The Godfather or Goodfellas or anything, right?
That's true. And, you know, I'm thinking of the Irishman comparison, too. It's like when it's like Jimmy Hoffa. I barely knew who Jimmy Hoffa was before I watched The Irishman. So I was right there on Wikipedia after I watched that film. I was like, oh, okay. Now I understand a little bit better the cultural context to this.
Right. And but after that, I mean, you understand the cultural aspect, but then, again, all the internal shit maybe Scorsese knows people who were at like different gangs, and he puts some Easter eggs that only former mobsters know, and it's like, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah.
The movie's 3 hours long, so whatever.
Yes, it's much longer than this one. Scorsese could probably use a little bit of that Johnny Toe economy in some of his films lately.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to the film. As there's a ton of characters in this film. Besides the big two of like Big D and Locke, did anyone stand out to you?
I mean, I really like Uncle Tongue. Yeah, I really like Uncle Tongue. I thought, even though he's not there very often, his presence is just very. It's just very big. I mean, from this, to me, one of my favorite scenes is when they're debating who's gonna be the president, and they're just like openly debating, and then some people are bribed, some people are not. Who the fuck knows? Who cares? I mean, but they're talking about like all that stuff, and then Uncle Tongue is just like, tea's ready, and it's just like the whole scene stops for tea, and right there you see this jolly man, and then right after he sets down the law, and it's like, look, we all get bribed, but that shouldn't cloud our way of viewing things. Big D bribed everyone a lot more than Luck, but I like Luck because he actually cares. And that's it. And that's why I'm voting for him. And then with him just saying that, everyone voted for Luck. And you're like, damn. And that presence. I don't know. Same with like some little details with his character when he's talking to Big D at the jail cell. And he's the way he holds his like open pants, because he's like big fat dude. But he's just holding his open pants, but in a way almost like, I don't give a shit. It's like, I am walking towards you holding my pants, and I'll tell you, hey, we're going to go to war if we do this. And
yeah,
I don't care what you're going to say.
No, I'm very glad you pointed that out. I think the guy has a great presence to him. He's like the, what's the guy, James Clyburn of this film, where he endorsed Biden and then everything just goes the way. So he was the great endorser of Locke, and he kind of swayed the election that way. But in terms of just like, I think it shows kind of what I was talking about earlier, where Johnny Toe just knows how to cast these different presences and stuff like that. And the guy hardly has to say anything just to seem like the most important person in the room. He's just like, tea's ready. And everyone just shuts the fuck up and listens to him. And he gives like probably like 25 seconds of speech. And that's enough to just sway the whole election. And that basically sets in course just sort of the plot of the rest of the film. And I also like how that's done. And I like the atmosphere of those scenes too. There's sort of like these very smoke-filled rooms, and like there's a ton of teacups and stuff like that, and just slowly pouring out tea. So I like that. That actor, Uncle Tung, was played by Wong Tin Lam, who is one of a very old school film director too. He was the mentor of Johnny Toe, actually. He sadly, but probably not unexpectedly, did not live too much long after this film. He died about 5 years later at the age of 83. He doesn't look like someone that's going to be living too long much after this film. But
I mean, 83 for his body type is
pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, I thought he. I agree with you. I think he's good.
I mean, and then obviously the movie there wants you people to like, or not like, but to pay attention to other characters. I mean, there's the guy with the short, like slightly chubby guy with the short hair and goatee. I forget his name now. The thousand knives man. That's kind of what I wrote down.
Big Head.
Big Head, yeah.
Another great name.
I know. So you got Big Head on. I mean, he's memorable mainly because he always almost talks entirely in chant.
Yeah.
And then you got the pretty guy,
Jimmy.
Jimmy, the student.
Yeah. You tell me if this is wrong. I sorry to interrupt, but did Jimmy's scene where he was at the college remind you of Stringer Bell?
No, it did not. It did not.
But do you know what I'm talking about? How
because Stringer Bell was in he was taking
community college course. Yeah.
Community college. Yeah. No. I was thinking more of that scene in one of the Politevskis, where I think it was that movie, the mustached man who gets angry and wants to like attack a mob, or like not a mob, but like a bunch of like criminals because they kidnapped him at a bank. And Street Law, that one. And there was like the guy who he basically forces to help him was like a student. I remember like when you're introduced to him as a student. So I thought of that.
Okay. Maybe it's because I knew his future role in it that I was like, I wonder if Johnny To saw The Wire before this. It's like, gonna stick this guy in an economics class where they're just speaking English to set him up. I mean, I thought it was a cool setup for a character. Okay, sorry.
It's a cool setup. It's a cool intro. But I mean, he's that character is so much different than Stringer Bell too. Though. That's why I guess I couldn't.
In Triad Election, he has a much bigger part. And it's been a while since I've seen the film, but he does remind me a little bit more of Stringer Bell in that one.
Also, you watched it like right after watching The Wire.
True. It was right around the same era.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted. So you're talking about Big Head and Jimmy, who was in the community college.
Was that a community college? I thought that was a straight up university.
Okay, sure. Straight up university, taking an English course. I probably just assumed community college from Stringer Bell.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that's a very large lecture hall. I don't know.
It looks too nice.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think I was done. I was just gonna say, the film clearly highlights those characters more. I mean, there are a couple. There's the alcoholic uncle, but I mean, to be honest, when it came to the uncles, there were a lot of uncles, and yeah, I'm sorry, I lost track of them.
I had a hard time keeping track too, because there's a bunch of them, and they all. That's where they started to blend together too. I think probably the only one that was a little more important than the others was Whistle, who was the previous chairman. But other than that, one other scene, because you brought up Big Head too, that I think everyone has to bring up when they talk about this film too, is that it's set up really well. Is one of my favorite scenes of the film, at least, is where he gets betrayed by the guy driving the truck. And so the guy just takes the keys and bounces. So Big Head knows what's going on, so he bounces too. But because he's, a little chubby, the other guy, Kuhn, I think is his name, catches up to him and starts beating the crap out of him, basically. Big Head starts crawling away. Love how that scene's set up. And he's just beating the crap out of him. And then they both get a call simultaneously. And the guy that Kuhn is working for, one of the uncles, basically switches sides from Big D to Locke. And so now those two are on the same sides after Kuhn has just beaten the shit out of him. And so Big Head gives him the baton to carry on, and then I presume goes to get medical attention. And I thought that scene was very dark, but also very funny in a way that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, no, for sure. I laughed too. I mean, in real life, I think he should have been dead. But instead, he just cursed 1,000 lightnings and knives and all that. I mean, the movie really shows how loyal all of these characters are.
Sure. To an extent. I think
loyal to their direct bosses.
Okay, I think, that is true. There is very little sort of turmoil of underlings sort of revolting against those above them, but we do see a lot of twists and turns, especially amongst the top brass, so to speak. Okay. So let's see. Couple other things that stood out to me. I thought the crate torture, where they just had a couple uncles in there and tossed them down hills, was really effective.
I
Having
know.
been to Hong Kong a couple times, it is like I live in a very hilly city in Seattle. Hong Kong is on another level. That thing is extremely steep. So I have seen some of those hills. Oh man, that is a brutal torture. I mean, if I had any complaint, it's probably that there should have been like more projectile vomit just like spewing out of the crates as they're falling down, if you wanted it to be more accurate. But that was that that I thought that was a well carried out torture that was fairly creative.
I thought they would have died, to be honest. Like I was like, all right, so that's his way of killing them.
Did
Cool.
they not die? I mean,
Nope.
they should. Okay.
No, so one of them was the alcoholic uncle,
Uh-huh.
the gambling addict, and I mean, like he's at like a fucking care home at the end, where Jimmy is like carrying because he was Jimmy's direct boss,
Mm-hmm.
and Jimmy is like carrying him with on a wheelchair, and he's just like, yeah, if you're not planning to go all the way up, just leave. Don't be like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you kept track of that uncle better than me. I kind of lost track of which two uncles were getting tossed down. But that basically sets into motion sort of like the next part of the plot, where Big D's plan after he loses the election is basically to mess up those two uncles, and then capture the baton from Whistle. Or is his name Whisper or Whistle?
Whistle.
Whistle. Okay. So get it. So Locke doesn't get it, and Big D does. But meanwhile, they're all locked up. And that's one thing I like about this film. We're talking about how there's like so many different characters and stuff like that. But in some ways, the plot can really be distilled down to just a few different details that are really like the most important things to understanding the plot. The election, Locke wins. Big D gets upset and sort of shakes it up, and is trying to get the baton. Locke eventually gets the baton, but cuts a deal with Big D and sets us up for our grand finale, which we'll talk about, I think, in a little bit. So I like how the plot is just really well constructed in the sense that you almost have like different levels, and you can sort of work out how many details you actually want to follow, because there's a ton of details for there. You can sort of keep track, but also the plot is relatively simple in the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Any scenes stand out to you besides kind of what we talked about?
I mean, yeah, we're gonna. Let's see. Well, I mean, there's a car chase scene. I mean, I'm looking right now.
The one where the cop gets run over?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slow chase, but it's still a car chase scene. Well, so one thing I guess before going into any particular scene, I liked. I felt that this movie did a good job at showing you Hong Kong. Like I've seen other Hong Kong films, and it's just very just city, skyscrapers, city, skyscrapers. While this is more gritty, you get to see the different people doing deals on the boat by the a certain border between Hong Kong and I don't know even with mainland, but
Yeah,
I mean,
China. Mm-hmm.
You also do experience some of the city, but more at the street level. I mean, in a way, I guess because of all the Italian films and politicese films that we saw before, I felt like this sort of also used the environment really well when it came to showing you the city and the people around it. And I thought that was kind of cool. But then, yeah, and I also the other thing, I guess. I mean, you talked about the crates, and that was really, I mean, the boxes, on the hill, and that's pretty good. I don't know. I mean, I have a couple notes, but let's see where you go.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just to sort of hop on back of what you're saying. I also like how it sort of opens and like as you said, Hong Kong is very much a city, so it makes sense that so many of the films would start there. But it also makes sense how these triads would be sort of operating at the outskirts. So that was definitely one of my notes too. How it sort of opens where both Big D sort of like hops on this like fish boat that. It's sort of like very rickety, and Locke also seems to be sort of in the outskirts of like this sort of like grassy hillside area, having chicken and stuff like that. So I like how it shows that. I mean, you even go on top of those hills where the crates, the scene that we just talked about, is in there. But we also spend a fair amount of time in the city too. Okay, well, I want to slowly move towards sort of the Locke and Big D stuff. But before that, talk a little bit more about Locke. I'm a big fan of how they do this character. Big D is almost the exact opposite in the sense that Big D, we know who he is instantly. Locke is a lot slower, and we find out more and more about him and how he's kind of he's kind of just as bad as Big D at the end, but we find that out much, much more slowly than Big D. He almost has very, very little to do in the film until he finally gets out of jail about, 50 minutes into the film, halfway, maybe even a little bit more, just because stuff is going on, and then the police tosses everyone in jail, I think basically to stop bloodshed from happening. They don't want war, so they're trying to do damage control. And so when he finally gets out, then we start to see him and see just how ruthless he can be. One of his first things he does is he gets out and he kills Whistle's. I have Whistle and Whisper in my notes, so apparently I could not get that name straight. So he kills Whistle. He has Whistle's sons killed immediately, and it's just like this guy seems like the most level-headed guy. Uncle Tung, who also seems like a good level-headed guy, backs him up. And like his first act out of prison is basically to kill Whistle's son to help bail out Big D to sort of gain, I don't know if leverage is the right word, but to gain some cachet with Big D. So did you have any thoughts on Locke and Simon Yam, who portrays him?
I mean, I think I think that I agree with you that the movie plays a little bit with your expectations, but at the same time it doesn't. His character doesn't really change. It's really your understanding of what his character is that changes, perhaps. And by that I mean, you hit on the nail right away. The first thing you get from him is calm and collected. Is calm, collected. He thinks about things. He processes things. That doesn't mean he's not going to take the hard choices, which is what he or the violent choices, which is what he does. Like, they know that Whistle can put the whole Brotherhood in danger. Get rid of him one way or another. So if it's killing his son, yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like it's a very logical step. Like nothing that he does is not is illogical. Like everything actually makes sense. And I feel like the movie at the end reinforces what it first shows you, right? He's a patient man who is very thoughtful about his process, but his process is still brutal. He's still a fucking criminal.
Yeah, he's just as much of a evil character as Big D, if not more so.
I mean,
if you think about the most horrific acts committed in this film, it's definitely done by Locke.
We don't see what Big D does. We don't.
But that's why I say the worst stuff
Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, I think I can easily assume that Big D does this kind of shit all the time too. I mean, there were even references of like one of the uncles being completely beat up because he did not show the ID, and he was beat up by Big D's man, and Big D probably gave the order. Like just to show a force.
Yeah, I mean, he also threw the uncles down. He also threw some senior citizens down the hill. So
I mean, that's straight up torture. So I mean,
yeah.
None of these people are good people. These are like you're watching a bunch of gangsters doing gangster shit.
Yeah, but if you're talking about killing women and children, Locke is the one that actually does that in this film.
You're right, but I mean that's because you're assuming that Big D hasn't done it, and I wouldn't put that. I would put that assumption aside.
No, I wouldn't either. I'm just saying that like if we're to solely judge off of what we see in the film, I they're both terrible human beings. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone's a terrible human being. It's like even Kuhn just like runs over cop, and it's just like, yeah, got to get away. And I'm just like, yeah, come on, drive faster, get out. You got to get out of there. You got to get that baton to Locke.
Yeah, I like he's like, oh, I ran over a cop, and he's like, damn it. All right, we'll take care of that later. You know, like
yeah, it's like totally from the Triad's perspective, which is like totally messed up. But yeah, I mean, like if you stop and think about this stuff, it's like, yeah, these are just like all of these people are just like horrible human beings.
Well, I mean, in that concept, it makes me think a little bit of Pulp Fiction. Like in Pulp Fiction, all the characters are horrible people. They probably all have killed women and children. We don't know. What we do know is that we're seeing everything in their perspective, and that's it. And what we're seeing is just gangsters doing gangster shit. And that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get back to Locke here. Did you have any more thoughts on sort of where you were going on that?
No, I mean, I personally thought Locke was for a movie that is so colored with characters. I thought Locke was a good character, but it was one of the bunch. I think for me, this film was more of an ensemble film.
Oh, 100% agree. Mm-hmm.
And there's no main character. There's actually the arc doesn't. There's no arc really when it comes to character's personality or way of change or learning or anything like that. It's more about. It's almost an arc that happens with you when watching the movie, the audience. So I mean, to me, Locke was probably not the most interesting character. To a certain point, because I mean, when he does things, I don't know. I was like, for example, I mean, this is spoiler full, so whatever. When he kills Big D, I was not surprised. I was kind of waiting. It's like, when is he gonna kill Big D? Because it was just like that was the reasonable thing to do. Like putting yourself in that mindset where they follow this triad almost as a fucking religion. And Big D wanted to change that.
Right. I remembered that he killed Big D, but I had forgot how they did it. So in my head, it was going to be some sort of a Godfather-like killing, where it was going to have sort of like this very like betrayal feel, which it also does. But the way that it happens is actually extremely impulsive. But yeah, let's talk about the end of the film. But I want to start a little bit before that, where they commit the ultimate act of brotherhood together, one of which you and I have done together too, where they get together and they kill someone. Just kidding. We have not done that, to be clear. But the ultimate thing of brotherhood. I'm a big fan of that scene too, where they're just hanging out in the oyster bar, the garage closes, and then they think we're not sure if Big D is gonna like side with Locke or if he's actually gonna, and he ends up siding with Locke, and they kill the guy together.
I mean, I think this scene is probably one of Toe's best scenes, in my opinion. It's just so well set up. I mean, if there are twists in this in this movie, this scene is one of those. Yes, it does set up as Big D. And I think Big D has probably the biggest arc in this film. They set up Big D as a hothead, as a guy who doesn't like luck, a guy who's willing to quit and create his own society because he was not elected president. All that stuff. So I mean, you assume Big D is going to be the person who's going to, the treasonous, like who's going to commit treason. And the way it's set up, where Luck arrives, you got one shot of Big D sitting on a table. Everything is dark except for the table lit, and Big D holding a cigarette or some smoke, just looking cocky as hell. And you're like, oh shit, is Big D gonna fuck over Luck? And then Then you have the closing of the restaurant and macheting the other opposing gangster instead. I think was just very beautiful. And then the killing itself, this is one of those where It reminds me of Cure. Cameras far away, you kind of just see them beating him up as he's wrapped on a rug, and Big D's just hitting him with different bottles that they keep on breaking. There's a little bit of comedy, but it's also just a very well shot scene, well shot, well lit. The way the framing actually hides the twists so well too. Showing the intentions that I think that was one of my highlights for sure.
Yeah, it's very well staged, the whole thing. I think you put it very well. I don't have too much more to add from that. Yeah, because you legitimately don't know what direction it's going to go at that point. Where we've just seen a little bit of a reconciliation between the Big D and Locke, so we honestly don't know if he's going to take advantage and it goes a way that we're not sure. So yeah, I thought it was really well done too.
Mm-hmm,
one other scene right before that too, before we get to the ending, I also wanted to highlight, because I thought this was also really well done, is the scene where they take the car ride together, and that's the first scene. It's interesting because we have 3 scenes at the end with those 2 characters together, all of which are really, really, a lot of stuff happens in those scenes. But up until that point, we don't see a single interaction between the 2. And that's the scene where the scene I'm talking about is their first scene together, where they take the car ride together. They both have their cars following them. We see sort of the reflections of Hong Kong coming on their mirrors, and they're just sort of going over all the different assets they have. They're like, oh yeah, we have this and this and this and this, and then they stop at a light, and we just sort of hear the train track. Fantastic use of sound design there, where he's like, get out if you're out, otherwise stay in the car and I'll know you're with me. And he ends up staying in the car, and and it's just a very tense scene, very, very well timed, and it ends with them kind of dancing together with silly pop music. So I really like how they do that stuff, and I like how it's done without sort of over explaining it or over using dialogue or something like that. And it's done with the more just visual and audio.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That was probably my second highest scene. I mean, my quote is amazing suspense at a red light.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, it's because what's amazing is because that nothing big is going to happen at that moment.
Yeah.
And by big, I mean there's not going to be any shootout. It's not your Mexican standoff as other films or whatever. No, all is that as soon as Big D walks out of that car, war will start, and the movie already explained to you all of that. Throughout the movie, it's already explained what that means. It's explained how many people will die. It's explained how Hong Kong will go to shit because of so in the car ride, they don't need to explain anything to you because the movie already put it in your mind. You already know that this gang is the biggest gang in Hong Kong, but it's actually quite a quite small gang when it comes to members, and they keep everything else in check. So if they die, or if they go to war, which means they die, the police will be fucked with hundreds and hundreds of gangsters because no one else is going to be keeping them in check. Shit like that. And I mean, that red light literally means between not just the gang, the family being broken up, but it means the end of Hong Kong as the movie sets it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's literally super tense, even though literally nothing actually happens, in terms of actions or stuff like that in the film. And
it's the implications.
And it just slows it down to this moment, and it's just really, really well done. So I thought that was good too. The film really concludes on a bang, doesn't it? It starts with that, then we go to sort of that. I like the really silly dancing to pop music stuff in the way that it just ends up sort of playing kind of poignantly at the end.
Yep.
And then finally, we've been sort of beating around the bush here, but talking about the actual conclusion where they are fishing together. and they're just sort of having a conversation, and then just circumstantially, Mrs. Big D, which is literally how she's credited in the credits, Mrs. Big D has to get up and go, and so she asks Locke's son, Danny, to come along, and so they go, and then so they start talking about business, and Big D just sort of floats the idea of having two chairmen, and Locke sort of initially is like, oh yeah, is like not saying no. And then, kind of out of nowhere, he just beats his head in with a rock, and
Right.
And then he has to also clean up Mrs. Big D. So he chases her down and does the double murder in a way that like leaves his son just like super traumatized. And we talk about sort of how the film sort of breezes through some other human trauma. It's like when Whisper, whatever, his son dies and stuff like that, or the cop gets run over. That stuff, we see that very much through the triad's perspective, as in like those are obstacles and stuff like that. In this one, I feel like it really shows the human impact, specifically with Mrs. Big D dying and Danny having to witness it too. So I think that sort of like adds this like really, really extra human element. And like a really emotional core to the film that previous to that moment it didn't have. And I think in that sense, you may expect it or you may not. It sounds like you kind of expected it coming, but I think it plays super well.
So this is the part where like movies can have like some movies can rely entirely on twists, and if you have the twist, if you already know the twist, the movie will be ruined. And other movies are so well made that a twist will not ruin that film. This is one of those examples. As I said before, I thought like just by looking at the character, by seeing how he works and all that, especially after knowing that he killed the son, Whisper's son, Whistle. No, fuck, you're fucking me over too now. He killed Whistle's son. The like that he will do everything to protect the society the way that it is and not change it, and that he will have to clean up, and Big D is a huge problem, so I mean he's gonna kill him, but how it's done, again, this is one of those where like it changes the perspective, right? You have them being friendly. You have them like spending time together, almost like a family, right? And there's that small pause before he kills Big D, where he's looking at the fish he just caught, like his 20th fish, because the guy is patient, thoughtful, all the characteristics we talked about, while Big D is yelling at the water, like cursing at that there are no fishes.
I need a hand grenade.
Yeah, and you see, Locke's face just being like, fuck, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to fucking kill him. Because he will cost me everything. He will cost us everything. And you just see it. And you see it on his face. You see it in the framing. And then when he does the killing, unlike any of the other kills, which are very quick, or maybe not so quick. Some of them are slow. But here is lots of close-ups. Just bashing him on the head with the rock at many angles. You see Locke's face as he's doing it often and not looking happy. And that this is a tragedy. It's not just revenge, but this is hard on him as much as it is on everyone. This is very hard on him. Not harder than on Big D, since Big D is dead. but this is very hard on him. And then the movie just, after all of that, hits you with that pop song, but in the sad tone, and you're like, yeah, this is good. This is good. I knew it's gonna happen, but it doesn't matter. You can feel the gravitas of the scene.
Yeah. It's sort of like up to that point, it's playing all these different notes and it's working super well, and then it finally sort of hits like a more emotional chord, I feel like, at the end. Mm-hmm. And I think it really packs a punch. Yeah. So if we're ever fishing and you suggest kicking me off of film to film, I just say make sure there's no big rocks around.
Um, now, on a side note on this scene, which I mean, I had to sort of the the burying of the dead bodies. They should have used a dummy. Like most of the time, I say like don't use a dummy, but the burying here, I thought dummy might have been helpful because you have Big D, the actor Tony Leung Ka-fai. Yeah, him on Mrs.
Big Tony.
D, Maggie Shu.
Yeah.
So you have both of them on that hole as he's literally shoving like dirt straight at Kafa's face, and you see his face. He has facial expressions because it's just bam hitting him in the face like over and over, and he kind of moves too. And you're like, I mean, this is a human being. You cannot you can be the greatest actor in the world, like unimaginable. But if you're getting a hit on if your face is getting hit constantly with sand or with not even sand, like straight up just dirt, yeah, you're gonna flinch. Like it's just inhuman to think otherwise.
Maybe that's why they gave him the best actor. They just felt bad for him that he had to endure through that scene.
I mean, I just thought that was pretty hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know who else wanted to use a dummy there? Tony Leung Ka-fai.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely twitched a couple times, and you're like, no shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that. Now, this movie also had I guess another thing. I don't know how close we're from wrapping up, but I did like other comedic moments in this movie, like for example how they almost burnt the baton. Yeah. I thought that was pretty funny because like the guy who actually knew where the baton was, he was not going to give it to them at all. He's not going to tell them that they were burning it, but they figured it out by how he was acting because they were building that fire.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh shit, that would have been pretty funny if they had burned that shit down.
Yeah. Lots of small details like that. I mean, I feel like there's like 10 of them or like hundreds of them that were probably missing too, not even remembering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, any other scenes you wanted to bring up?
I mean, there's the big. I mean, there's the one big fight scene in mainland China. I think many of those were happening on mainland.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. Where you have Jimmy, who at first you don't know it's Jimmy, and then Jimmy comes out of nowhere, and the motorcyclist, I forget the Jet,
yeah.
And Jet gets macheted while he's still killing everyone, and it's just like somehow survives.
Yeah. Well, I like how at the end it's like all of these characters like sacrifice so much to get the baton. It's like Big Head gets beaten up, and then like in the end, him and Coon end up on the same side. Like Coon runs over a cop. Jimmy and Jet, I mean, like they don't even know who's on the same side. It's like there's so much friendly fire. It's like Jet throws like white paint all over Jimmy's car and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like at the end, they all end up on the same side, and they end up taking like the oath together like 20 minutes later into the film. So I like how that's done. Yeah, I mean, as usual, I think the action of it was pretty competently done. Yeah.
It felt raw, which is kind of one nice thing about this.
Yeah. I mean, this is like if your only exposure to sort of Hong Kong cinema is like Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee or something like that, this is just a totally different beast than those films.
Right. Because I mean, like I've seen, so with Hong Kong crime thrillers that I've seen, they tend to be, more shootouts and things like that. And then the other Hong Kong films that I've seen is more like martial arts and things like that. But I mean, this is by raw. I mean, it's just like very slow. Again, from far away, not like from an interesting distance, slow, shank like, impalement of someone with a machete, or the guy getting hit with the machete like straight on his shoulder, and then he pulling that machete off the shoulder. All those things. That kind of rawness I had not seen actually in other Hong Kong films either.
Yeah.
Myself.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, especially, I mean, those are probably the films most people get introduced to for Hong Kong. But, the place has a ton of range, and this film is also a genre film, and it's pretty entertaining. So a little bit more on Johnny To. I sort of skipped over this stuff at the beginning, too, is, like, unlike a lot of sort of his contemporary sort of, like, I don't know if you want to use like the term auteurs or just directors in East Asia or even in America, like people like Quentin Tarantino or Bong Joon-ho, like those people are making films very, very slowly. Johnny To is probably one of the most significant, if not the most significant, sort of like post-handover filmmaker in Hong Kong. And he has been extremely prolific. He founded a company called Milky Way Image, in Hong Kong. And he has been one of like the people that's just been doing a ton of films per year, sort of as being the sort of one of the key players in that company. He's also the director that they go to the most often. So, for instance, in this range, in 2004, he produced and directed 3 films. In 2005, he produced and directed only this, so it was a slow year for him. 2006, he produced and directed 2 films and produced another. So the guy is extremely prolific. He was producing and directing about 3 films per year, just sort of around this time. So it's amazing the amount of detail and stuff like that goes into this film when the guy is cranking these films out almost at the same speed that the Italians were in like the 1970s in films that are, I mean, in my opinion, are a lot less well thought out and crafted in terms of characters and depth and stuff than this film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
So another quick question. Just give me your initial reaction. Election or Infernal Affairs? As far as a Hong Kong gangster film from the last 20 years. What's your pick?
They're both very different.
They are.
I mean, whatever answer I'll give, it's probably not going to be a fair answer. But as of right now, I feel like Elections. Or Election. Infernal Affairs is not my favorite Hong Kong crimes film. I think I've seen a few, and I don't remember the other ones. But I do remember Infernal Affairs mainly because of The Departed, which to me is the superior film, even though it's a remake. Sacrilege on my side. But
it's been a hotly contested question for the past 15 years.
Yeah, I know. And Infernal Affairs gets kind of long to me. Gets just too weighty. And well, this one is just quick and dirty.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I also tend to pick this film. I'm also in probably the unpopular camp of preferring The Departed to the Infernal Affairs. So I think we see eye to eye. I mean, I like Infernal Affairs plenty. I think it's quite a good film, but I tend to like sort of like this dark and gritty versions a bit more.
It's our colonized mentality.
Yeah, I guess so. Something like that. Okay. And the other thing I wanted to add about Johnny To, too, is he's known for doing a bunch of genres as well, including, like, romantic comedies. And I will say that if I have any complaint about him, it's I do not have the same sense of humor as him in a way that I wouldn't say about, like, someone like Bong Joon-ho. So his films can be a little hit or miss depending on how much humor, and I don't think it's a coincidence that a film like Election, which it has, a little bit of dark humor sprinkles in it, but is mostly kind of in the dark and gritty genre, I think tend to be my preference for him.
I was trying to think of another filmmaker who at some point was shitting out a crap ton of movies. Would you say Robert Rodriguez could be comparable like that? I mean, he's
probably the closest, but he's probably still even like half the pace of Johnny To.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. I think he was pooping out at least like one movie a year. 2005 being like the one with the most movies, and that was three.
Yeah. I mean, that's still pretty impressive. I mean, it's also different studio systems. It's like if you set up, like Johnny Toe is in charge of his own studio and stuff like that. So having that sort of infrastructure around him, I'm sure helps. Like he didn't get a writing credit for this film, so obviously he wasn't involved in like the the actual writing of it.
Yeah.
Um, one last thing I wanted to add. This is just very random before we go to who won the movie and rating, or if you want to kick anything else too, you're welcome to. It's just I also like how the film also shows people always eating. It's nice to see. It's like it's very natural to see. I feel like a lot of Hollywood films or films that you're used to, it's like they sort of like beat around the eating, probably because it's a lot easier to shoot without just sort of having like people biting into like a chicken drumstick or something like that. But this film seems to actually show like different dishes and like have people just eating like dim sum or chicken at the beginning or whatever, or a spoon even.
Right.
I hope they didn't have to do too many takes of that one.
I mean, yeah. I'm. Yeah, I don't know if I 100% agree. I think gangster movies actually focus a lot on eating too, like.
Okay, fair enough.
Scorsese. I think of Scorsese at least like a couple of like eating or drinking scenes.
Yeah, you're right.
Even
I mean,
The
Godfather. Yeah. They have the what's his name? The guy like that's teaching them how to cook tomato sauce, I think.
Yeah, I think eating is. I'm not gonna say like that this film copied a trope, but I think eating is an element of a good gangster movie.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Well, anything else to add before we go to who won the movie and ratings?
No, let's just go for it.
Okay. Well, who won the movie?
I want to say it's between Johnny Toe. Yeah, Johnny Toe.
Okay. If you had to give it to any acting performer in the film, who would you choose?
I really liked. You said Big Tony.
Yeah, Big Tony, Tony Leon Coffey.
Yeah, I really like Big Tony.
Yeah. He's the one that won the acting award too. I would probably agree. There's some other good performers in there, but he's the standout. I'm gonna give who won also to Johnny Toe. I think it's just hard to give it to anyone else when I think it's such an ensemble cast, so it's hard to single out an actor as being like the single most important thing. Okay, and rating.
This is 8.5.
Okay, yeah. That is exactly the same rating I was going to give it. So I guess we see very eye to eye on this film. And next time we'll bring on good old Reese and Matthew Broderick, and we'll see the election double bill.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know anything about the other movie actually. Have you seen it?
I have. It's a decent film. I'm generally a fan of Alexander Payne, who's the director there.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's okay. It's a drama. It's been a few years since I've seen it. But
what other movies has Payne done?
Sideways, Downsizing.
Okay.
Yeah, couple films like that.
I think I've only seen Sideways. That's the one about wine.
Yes, that's the one about wine. Yeah. Okay, well, that wraps up this episode of Film to Film. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Ciao.